Hello, this is Shai. Today on The Joy of CAD, we are going to explore modify commands in AutoCAD 2017. Modify commands are accessible via four primary locations. We have the Modify panel at the top within the ribbon of the Home tab. We also can select an object by left-clicking and right-click, and we have several modify commands available through the command window there. Or we can select an object and hover over the Properties panel. We can make any of these geometry changes here in this location. Or finally, we can simply enter the command via the keyboard as we're entering the Move command here and move the object. These are all convenient ways of modifying objects. So let's begin with the 12 modify commands within the top of the modify panel. Note if you select left-click the down arrow there, you'll see that there are additional hidden commands, modify commands also available to you. We're going to focus primarily on the 12 big commands first. As you just saw, we use the Move command, which you select the object and by left-clicking, then you right-click. Now it wants to know base point. You can either use one of your O-snaps and select, as I'm doing here, the center, or you can select anywhere on the screen or some other object as a reference to move that object around. Pretty straightforward command. Next we have the Rotate command. Let's just draw a simple box here. And the Rotate command, by the way, the Rotate command is RO. I'll try to enter these on the keyboard so that you can see them as well, so you can recognize the quick keys. If we select this object, left click, and then we right click to select the base point. You can select anywhere. I might select in the middle. Now I can rotate to any angle. If I want, I can turn my ortho on and then I can rotate in 90-degree increments. Or I could select my ortho and I could snap to a set angle if I wanted to rotate in a known increment. So all very useful. The Trim command, let's go ahead and draw some lines here. The Trim command allows us, and TR by the way, allows us to select a cutting edge or multiple cutting edges by left-clicking. We right-click to move to the next portion of the command. Select Objects to trim. We now left-click those items that we want to remove. Notice the red X indicating that's the item to be removed. We could also move on other sides depending on how many cutting edges we had selected. Right-click and left-click Enter to finish or complete the command. The Trim command also has an Extend option. If you click on the down arrow, which you can extend an object. Let's say we select this line by left-clicking, we right-click, and then we select the object that we want to extend. Left-click and then Enter. We have the Erase command, fairly straightforward, and the Erase command is E. So we can erase an object, left-click, or multiple objects. And we can also select by crossing windows, left-click, and then right-click to enter. We have the Copy command, which is CP. We can select an object, right-click. Now we can specify a base point. In this case, I'll select the center of the circle, and let me turn my ortho off, and I could select the endpoint of a location or an intersection or whatever. We can also do multiple copies, as you saw I just did there. Very useful command. We have the mirror command. So let's say we would like to create a mirror object of this circle. We can, well, the mirror command is MR. Mirror command is MI. I rarely use the mirror command. So if I select an object and I right click, I can specify a line upon which I want that object to be mirrored. And I can also choose to delete the original object or not. So in this case, I'll leave the original object intact. Next, we have the fillet command. If we initiate, and fillet is just F, you'll use this command a lot. So let's say I want to apply a radius around this corner. I can specify an R, enter, and I could say 0.75. We'll apply a 7¾ inch radius to this. I select the two objects and it applies my radius. You can also continue that command using a multiple feature. If you type M, and then you could do multiple radius if you have several things to apply. The fillet command, you also have the chamfer option available. If you don't want a rounded corner and you just want a chamfer, you can do that as well. Next, we have the explode feature. So let's say, for instance, we insert a polyline. Oops, turn my ortho off. And we want to break that item up. We can use the explode command. The explode, you have to type explode. In this case, it's easier just to pick it off of the menu at the top. And that breaks it into the individual line segments. Very, very useful command. Stretch, the stretch command allows us to, and that is STR, so we can select some objects and we can move those or adjust those by length. And again, if we used our O snaps or we insert set values, we could stretch that by a set distance. Next, we have scale. So we could select some objects and then we can make those larger or smaller. And we can enter a value so that we can, scale it proportionately to our needs. Let's clear this off. Now we have the array command. Let's draw a circle. And how about a line? And how about draw a small box here. And let's move that box. We're going to move it by the midpoint, the end point here. Right. And let's see. Let's array that object. AR is the command for array. This object, and we right click, and we want to do a polar array around this center point, and we can enter how many objects we want to array. We can modify that just based on adjusting these grips. So we can change the angles, we can change lots of features there. You notice there's an entire palette that pops in at the top with lots and lots of options. Play around with this one, it's really useful, it'll save you a lot of time. You also, in addition to the polar array, there's also rectangular and path. you'll use all of these for your drafting. So now let's let's cover a few of the additional hidden commands at the bottom of the Modify tab. We have the Set to By layer. We're not going to go over these in much detail. I would highly recommend that you do not adjust your by layer settings in AutoCAD. Lots of new AutoCAD users can get into trouble that way. You get some errant things happening. I, again, just avoid changing your by layer settings. Once you get more experience with AutoCAD, you can play around with those, but not at this point. Change space, I'm not going to worry about that at this point. Lengthen, pretty straightforward, similar to the stretch command. Edit polyline, we used that in an earlier, and edit spline, we used those in an earlier demo. Edit hatch, let's say for instance that we have a rectangle and we hatch that object. Let's see. All right. The edit hatch feature allows us to select that, and then it brings up a palette of options which you can play with, similar to what we've done in the past during the drawing segment. You can edit an array using this feature here. Again, similar, pulls up a palette. We have the Align command. If you notice, that allows you to take two objects and align them together. Break command, similar to a trim command, except you don't need the cutting edges. You don't need to specify cutting edges. You could select near, pick a point, and then break the line into two segments. Break at a single point. You won't see a gap in the line that you break. Join command, again, we used that in an earlier episode and earlier in this as well. And we have reverse, copy nested objects, delete duplicate objects, which is also the overkill command. That's useful if you have several lines drawn over top of one another. Let's say you have a big drawing and you want to delete those duplicated line segments. You can use this command to clear those out. And finally, bring to front. You'll use this command. This is useful if you have lots of objects drawn in a drawing, and let's say you want one brought above or in front of the other. Pretty straightforward command to use. I'm not going to cover that one either. Again, you'll use it later in your drawings. And finally, I would just like to point out that whenever you want to modify something, you can use this properties palette. Let's say, for instance, we highlight this circle, and we see that the diameter is 1.82. We can physically change that value here. Let's say we want to make that 2.2, and we can change the geometry of the objects just through this properties palette. Really, really useful. Highly encourage you to use this for reference. Great for checking your work, but also for making specific modifications to features. This concludes this session of The Joy of CAD. Enjoy!